Everyone, welcome today. This is the Profitable Regeneration Summit. And as I mentioned before, when we do great things, we are met with great opposition. Can I just say that the adversary's been working pretty intense on me, maybe on some of you, and saying, hey, don't show up to this class today. That guy doesn't have his stuff together. The Zoom links aren't working. But hey, you persisted. You persisted and you showed up. And I know because you're here, you will experience some breakthroughs. You'll be able to find the answers that you are here to find. So as we get started, keep sharing in the chat where you're from. Share what your intentions are for being here today. Let us know what brought you here. And we promise you that we will deliver. We will help you to be able to find the answers. And it's not in us, it's through us, right? The answers come from a higher source. So Steve, let's roll right into your deal. And I'm going to fix this Zoom room so we can let everybody else in. This is my friend Steve Campbell. If you haven't had the chance to listen to Steve, you guys are in for a treat. His presentations are some of the most watched that when I post them up on YouTube, they just consistently get the most views. And so we're pretty excited to learn.
Well, Jared and all, thank you for the opportunity. I guess I want to say I think I've been busy and I maybe didn't put enough time into the PowerPoint, and I might have gotten things a little bit out of alignment here. But I was giving a talk a few years ago, and I wound up with one of these in my hand, a solo cup, and I thought, well, that's the name that this talk really deserves, because if the head's on the little end, that kind of depicts a cow, and if the head's on the big end, it kind of depicts a bull. We'll get into that here. The sex hormones shut off long bone growth, so taller animals in any breed, everything else being equal, are less fertile than shorter animals. And Gene Meitler, God rest his soul, any one cow can make a liar out of you. There are a number of boxes I like to talk about checking to see. I come to somebody's place. I'm doing a one-shot picture where you're there 365. Anyway, there are cows that don't fit what I'm about to talk about, and they're very fertile too. And you should pay attention to those older cows and what they've been able to do. All right. A lot of different zones across the U.S. for different temperatures for where you might want to plant certain plants. And you take something from Missouri or Louisiana and try to plant it near Bismarck and it won't grow. Different horses for different courses. So there's a general shape to this cow, but the depth of that with cow and the width of that cow will show up. This is all the different varieties of potatoes grown in Peru, which go from sea level up to, I don't know, 20,000 feet, something like that. England had all these different breeds. All you had to do was go over one hill into the next valley, and it took a slightly different animal to be 3 valleys in from the coast than to be right on the coast. And anyway, a fellow I was at, I can't remember where, but he was like, these Western Nebraska genetics just weren't working in my cow herd here in Indiana. Well, the more acres it takes to run a cow, the wider and deeper the front end. The fewer acres, you can get them too fat. I'll show that in some pictures later. You can get them too fat if you're going for that wide, deep front end where it only takes 2 acres to run a cow. So I guess this would be unfair to Jared, but if Jared's Billy Crystal and City Slickers. No, Jared's on the fence, and he's talking to Billy Crystal here on the horse in City Slickers, trying to tell him what animal he's looking for, and Billy has no clue what all of these different things are, and a lot of what I'm about to talk about might sound like that to those of you that haven't heard anyone talk about what's coming. A Kentucky coal miner from Kentucky sent me this. You know, that dead canary, it's like we're supposed to get out of the coal mine, and the coal miners can't remember. So Michael McDonald, he got a PhD, and I don't remember what it was in, but Michael shared before he died that if you're just selling calves off the ranch, 40% of the profit comes from fertility, have a cow having a calf every year and more years of that. 30% is what's it costs to keep the cow. So 70% of what you on your ranch have control of. I think Alan Crockett's probably going to talk about it. Area of control, area of influence, area of concern, area of influence, area of control. We have on the ranch the control of this 40% and the 30. The other two are only 30%. Why are we trying to do what they want when it takes away from our profit? I'm going fast. I could slow down. It seemed like there's a lot to go through. If you have a question, please raise your hand in the chat, and Jared or someone will see it, and we can back up a slide or two. I like the questions as they come up. It's not a problem. Okay. There's a specific shape that affects fertility, butterfat, and then glandular function. Fred Provenza wrote a book called Nourishment, and he talks about the home field advantage. A calf, a yearling, an animal will never do, and unless you take it to a higher plane of nutrition, will never do better than what mom was eating while it was in utero and what it was eating at mom's side. It's set up for that unless you take it to a higher plane of nutrition. Well, later on in the talk, I'll talk about how to try to get a cleaner, more nutrient-rich inner uterine environment, the epigenetics, but that's not where we're at the moment. So the taller an animal in any breed, the less fertile. Having my handy dandy pelvis here, the flatter we are, and the more the cow's head would be over that way, the more the grow bone, what I call the anti-fertility bone, is sticking up back here, the less fertility. The more slope there is, there's a real good slide coming up, and this tends to round down, the more fertility there is in the animals. So shorter animals tend to have more fertility. Everything else being equal, see that second or third line there? I'm making a lot of generalizations today, but everything else being equal, testosterone shuts off long bone growth in the back end of the bull first. So the more fertile bulls, if the head is on this end, will look like they're walking uphill on level ground. If they're going to do it, they'll probably do it by 3. If you find one walking uphill at 2, I would buy that bull. Anyway, they tend to be flat or walking downhill as calves, so you really can't tell it as a calf. Estrogen shuts off long bone growth in the front end of the cow first. So if the head's on this end, she looks like she's walking downhill on level ground. So a fertile bull, the head would be on this end. Everything is getting bigger as you go forward. Someone, when I was young, described it as 2 right triangles, and I just couldn't wrap my mind around that. But a fertile cow, using the 2 solo cups, it's like, well, everything is getting bigger as you go back on the cow, and everything's getting bigger as you go forward on the bull. Well, why is the bull getting bigger on the front end? The more vertical the ribs, like that last one pointing right at his prepuce. So I'll have a bull here in a minute. I guess I should be doing it there. The deeper you're going to get up front and the wider you're going to get up front. If you're linear measuring, it's top line, pin to pole versus heart girth. On a cow, you want the last rib angle back towards the rear cannon bone. On a cow, it's flank versus top line. Anyway, when I was a kid, Ferdinand the bull was was a big deal in the cartoons. Ken Redmond, it was his grandfather Carney who heard Burl Winchester talking about linear measuring sheep and said, hey, can we adapt this to cattle? And over the course of, I don't know how many years, they figured it out. It was about the time that computers were first coming out. Ken was kind of the math whiz, and he's the one that did all of the relationships, shall we call it. Anyway, I don't know how many tens of thousands he measured. He didn't use. He only took 9,500 head, all one breed, anywhere from Mexico to Canada. And there were 3 commonalities with cows that had had 10 or 11 calves in a row without skipping. So a bigger belly than the average cow in the herd. If the head's on this end, we want that bottom line sloping down, a bigger belly, and then a wider butt. I like to talk about the aspect ratio. You're looking at them from the back end. Are they 40% as wide as they are tall or wider? The narrower they are, the harder calving they're going to be. You're going to get sorry, this is anatomically incorrect, but you can see how wide and round this pelvis is. The narrower they are, the narrower the pelvis. I'm going to have pictures of the front end of the cow here in a while, but the width of the muzzle is approximately equal to the width of the pin bones. All right. So the width of the muzzle is approximately equal to the width of the pins. One of the things to tell about long, skinny faced cows, you're pulling more calves. And then more slope from hooks down to pins. I have one of my 2 favorite slides coming up, but hooks level with the backbone. As they're walking, you want to see those hook bones rocking up above the backbone. We don't see that very often. Anyway, I guess I need a widescreen TV so you can see me go over there. More slope. That was the thing they had to have to get the 9th, 10th, 11th calf out. And I guess while I'm right there, because I eliminated a slide, but the flatter this pelvis, the more the vulva tilts forward. So when the bull shows up and there's foreign material here, it takes it in and then it can't get out of the cow, drains into the cow. We get cystic ovaries. She can't breed back. Versus we have plenty of slope with a vertical vulva, typically nothing there, but the pelvic floor would be tipping back out of the cow and she can get rid of that foreign material. Most of the times it's not there if the vulva is vertical. Gene Meitler, we're taking the backboard and we're tipping the rim up towards the backboard. Harder to get cows, fertile cows, with flat slope from hooks to pins. So this is out of Ken's master's thesis. Old cows were months of age down here across the bottom, 130 right here. Old cows, you can see they have a bigger flank than the herd average, but right about here we're starting to lose teeth, and that's when that having a bigger belly becomes more and more and more important as they get older. Anibal Portomingo got his PhD in 1995 at New Mexico State, found that the average beef cow in the U.S. in 1995 digested 55% of what she ingested. He heard Gerald Fry talk 4 or 5 years later, got his data out and found that there were some that digested 70% and some only down around 40, given the average of 55. 18 years later, Don Faulkner, Arizona State, said, we're getting really good at predicting percent of body weight that a group of dry cows would ingest, depending on what we were feeding them. And so if they were average, what he said, sorry, what he said, what we can't tell you is what individuals in the groups are eating. Some are eating twice as much as others. So if they were averaging 3%, some were eating 2% of their body weight, some were eating 4% of their body weight. Well, the cows with the head being on this end, the cows with the biggest guts tend to digest a greater percent of what they ingest. So if you've got cows that are walking uphill with no guts, they're going to be the hardest keepers. I was at a guy's place, and he had put together a group of cattle for grass finishing. And I said, well, these are your best. These will work till you can replace them. But these three over here, they were the reverse wedge. They had the head being on this end. They had no guts. Said, you're just not going to make any money on those. And the next morning he dropped me off at the airport, and I turned my phone back on for stop, and here's a message. He said, I've been thinking about those three that you didn't like, the reverse wedge. He said, all the other cattle, they get up and they eat for a couple of hours, get a drink, eat for another hour, lay down, chew their cud. He said, but those three that you did, the reverse wedge, he said, they get up in the morning and they stand there and they eat all day long. Anyway, 30% of the profit, if you're just selling calves, is the keeping cost of a cow. So kind of can't stress enough how big that belly is. You've got a 1,000-pound reverse wedge cow eating 4% of her body weight versus a 1,300-pound, the proper wedge to the cow, eating 2%. That's 26 pounds versus 40 for the smaller cow. The most important word here is if. If the digestion of minerals, vitamins, fats, and proteins is similar. And if they average 55% digestion and we're feeding 10% protein, they get 5.5% usable protein out of that. The rest of them goes out the back. But if you've got one of those cows that's a better digester, and if the digestion is similar, you feed 8% protein, she gets 5.6% usable. I don't know whether that's true or not. I doubt ADM, Cargill, Pfizer, or Monsanto is going to spend any money at a university trying to figure that out, because it would be money out of their pocket and into yours. So this was, I think, from North Dakota. Yeah. So estrus was lower. Breed up was 16% lower if you had to assist. And then cesarean, 26% lower rebreed. Well, the need for the wide rump with slope, this slide right here, a wide rump with slope, we're not assisting getting the calves out. So this may be my favorite slide in the whole PowerPoint today. This is right out of Bonsma lectures. He's showing a long bone, you know, longer long bones on the left and shorter long bones on the right. And you can see the difference in the slope from hooks to pins. Today, this side here is about as good as you're going to find in most herds. If you notice, the hook bones are level with the backbone in both cases. If you were to stretch hide over the top, other than this little thing, they would look fairly similar. More on that in a minute. So more slope. So Bonsma drew this and put in a dotted line saying this, we get to use this much more pelvis area. And I would either be getting thrown out or getting an F today, because I would say, Professor, you've put the dotted line in the wrong pelvis. This dotted line needs to be dotted from here up and back down over here. When I was probably in my teens, somebody told me a broom-handled tail cow is more fertile. And until I saw this picture in the background, I never understood. Here we've got a broom-handled tail on the one on the right. They both are level with the backbone on the top. The only place for this big, thick tail to go is down into the pelvic opening. You want cows with small diameter tails. You want bulls with small diameter tails. Jared, has there been any questions so far?
Nope, not yet. We're doing good. Thanks everybody for being on here. We've got the Zoom room opened up. We've got now approaching 200 people on. And so again, if you know of anybody that tried to get on earlier, send them a quick message, say we've got the technology fixed.
So this is that reverse wedge cow, head being on this end. You can see she's walking uphill here, and yes, she has slope from hooks to pins, but it's the wrong way. I want her pins being clear down here. So this was like those 3 head I said you're never going to make any money on, and he took them to Monday. That was a Saturday when he called, and he took them to the sale barn on Monday to get rid of them because he could see all they were going to do is cost him money. So what trying to point out here earlier, I talked about the bull and the vertical rib. You can kind of see the shadow here, but this last rib, he kept turning to the left, and I finally just snapped a picture, but it's pointing, the last rib's pointing right at his prepuce. See, on a cow, we want that last rib pointing down here somewhere between the hock and the ankle. But the more vertical this is, the more space it puts in between the front legs, the more his front toes are straight forward or slightly pigeon-toed, and then the more room there is between the top of the shoulder blades, gaining heart girth. So bulls with wide front ends give you cows with wide back ends. At a year of age, this is back to Michael McDonald and linear measuring. At a year of age, for each inch, the bull's shoulders are wider than the length of the rump. It's 2.5 days less gestation. That's about a 5-pound lighter calf. I think people pick bulls for calving ease according to birth weight. Well, if you've got a bull that's a +2 or 3 in the shoulders at a year of age, he's going to get the calf out 5 days to a week early, 10 to 15 pounds light. This is the definition of calving ease. Frank Ethorn had a bull named Pawpaw in Douglas, Wyoming. When he was 6.25 years old, his shoulders were 8.5 inches wider than the length of his rump. So if you take your phone and you want to look at something and you go like this, everything kind of grows at the same rate. Well, on a bull, because of testosterone, the shoulders are going to grow wider faster than anything else on the bull grows. The progesterone, similarly on the back end of the cow, the width of that rump is going to grow wider faster than anything else grows on the cow. Frank put that bull whose crest dwarfed his head. His crest was bigger than his head. He put him on 100 yearling heifers, massive fronted bull, in a 4,600 acre pasture, and 60 days later, there were 92 pregnant heifers, but Frank said it was a long walk home. And what I'm circling here is Gerald Wyatt Classic Livestock Management Services out of Australia. I recommend you go on their website and kind of look at stuff. They're getting older and they're about to close up shop. They have a book, A Vision Tender. Anyway, he said, if you can see the epididymis, these 2 little walnut-shaped pieces right on the bottom of the testicles, from 10 feet away, you have a pretty good idea that bull can service 50 to 60 cows in the first 21 days. Johann Zietzman, Man, Cattle, and VELD, that's grass. He wants a bull for an all grass situation. If you have ranches and you're selling calves, 70% of the profit is fertile cows that don't cost a lot to run. Well, you need a bull that looks like 8 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound sugar sack. The more vertical. Okay. Spring of rib, angle of rib. I'll go beyond that. Okay. So walking uphill on level ground. Well, that's cheating a little bit on that Jersey bull because he's standing on a slight incline. Walking downhill on level ground. Well, we're cheating again a little bit on this South bull because she's standing on a slight decline. All right. This one in the bottom photo, the problem with that cow is she is in the wrong environment. She is going to get too fat to rebreed. And this is kind of out of Dick Divens information. But he never really got over here into who's going to waste money on cows, but you can make them too fat to rebreed. So back to this cow here, she doesn't have a U-neck like this girl here has, a U-neck. This girl has a pointed pole as well. Anyway, it's more flat. If she ever skips, she won't rebreed. Just isn't going to happen. I've seen it happen a lot of times. So easy keeping is 30% of the profit. The butterfat indicator, size of the belly, fine bones, they're all going to be telling you, if you're willing to listen and look, that they're more easy keeping cows. So the wider this brisket here. So there's a fellow in Gan Valley, South Dakota, that put together a group of 12 cows. These cows are 12 or older, who came out of cows that lived to be 12 or older, who came out of bulls whose mothers lived to be 12 or older. And I looked at those last summer, and the commonality was this U-shaped brisket here instead of a V up front. And Secretariat. In 1973, a horse called Sham ran faster than any other horse had ever run. Secretariat ran just a little faster that day. 2 weeks later, in the Preakness, Sham again set a new record for that track. Secretariat ran just a little faster. 2 weeks later at the Belmont Stakes, Sham hit his head against the starting gate, broke out a couple of teeth, and ingesting blood didn't work. Secretariat won by 33.5 lengths. The average racehorse they autopsy, a 7 to 9 pound heart, the biggest they had ever seen was 14 pounds. When Secretariat died, his heart was 22 pounds. 4 years later, Sham died. His heart was 18 pounds, the two biggest hearts they had ever seen. Well, this 12-12-12 deal, you need a large heart. And what they found out was these were high altitude adapted animals that were going to live that long. You could take somebody, well, forget that. PAP score, pulmonary arterial pressure. Dr. Holt from Colorado State. I don't know if he's still there or not, but that was the biggest thing about those cows that lived to be old. But if it takes 2 acres for the cow or 100 acres for the cow, is going to vary how far off the ground that U-shaped brisket is going to be. Sorry, a long time on one slide here. This is more of a V-shaped brisket. This would work well where it was 5 acres or less, maybe. And another one a little bit more. Adrenal hair wall right here. It's just 360 degrees. I think Temple Grandin would be fine with its location. Butterfat, a loose hide is the number 2 indicator of butterfat. It's the number 2 indicator of tender meat. A bald udder is number 1 for indicator of butterfat. If you want daughters that have a lot of butterfat, that are easy keeping, that are going to grow better calves without high maintenance cost, it's not milk, it's the butterfat. You want a bull with a lot of vertical folds. I'm just going to kind of burn through this slide. You notice how high the hook bone is here, up level with the backbone, big stifle muscle. The earlier in life you see that. Walking downhill, but slope from hooks down to pins. South Pole cow in Texas. The more vertical folds there are in the hide, the better. The further back they go, the better. If you find heifers or cows with vertical folds from the vulva down to the udder. See all the little folds in here? See how smooth, soft, all the folds in here? Those really, I've just never seen one that had all that. I don't care what her shape was, that didn't raise a whale of a calf. That's Butterfat. More things to look at for the vertical folds in the hide. Okay, so what I want you to look at, I'm going to leave my cursor here. Ahead of a highly fertile cow that has 7 calves to the age of 8 years. She has a calm, lean, matronly head, and the horns are a uniform color, desirable point. Now watch a note. Oh, darn it. My pointer went away. Note the steery head of the subfertile cow. So I guess my pointer is going to go away. I'm looking how much of the lower jaw you can see, how much of the lower jaw you can't see, how much you can see, how much you can't see. Is everybody kind of getting that steery head, the more lower jaw, the less lower jaw, more fertile, less fertile, more fertile, less fertile. Okay, now I want you to look down here at the brisket. The fatter it is, less fertile. The leaner it is, more fertile. We got a dewlap. Less fertile when it's fat, more fertile when it's not. How do I, oops, just a minute. Can you see that she has a U neck up here on top? Okay, the steery headed one, it's flat. A U neck, more fertile, flat, less fertile. Look at how coarse the horns are. Ugh. How smooth these horns are, how coarse those horns are. All right. Small cannon bone, right at the knee, the smaller, the better. And then it ever so slowly widens out to the width of the ankle. Number 1 for tender meat, but it's a real close number 3 for butterfat. So we've got a cow here in the center, not too bad. Big bone versus a smaller bone. You want the smaller bone. Fine bones, more fertile. Big bones, that's what they want in the feedlot. Unusually small legs for the size of the animal. And you look at her, she's got a U brisket. She's got a U brisket, not a V. A Jersey. Okay, we kind of beat that up. So here, anytime a bull or a cow or a steer or a heifer, they go to put their head down to eat, you want the backbone below the shoulder blades. Here's this Jersey, her backbone's above the shoulder blades. The higher the backbone is above the shoulder blades, the higher the maintenance of the animal. You're losing that 30% profit if you're choosing animals like that. Well, you can see her son, who he's just about flat, hook or a shoulder blade, backbone, shoulder blade. When they walk, you want to see the shoulder blade on the weighted side rotate up just above the backbone. You want to see that hook bone in the back rotate up above the backbone as they walk. Well, bred this cow to this bull walking straight at us, and in one generation was able to correct it that much. If you wanted a bull, well, here's a bull with his head down, but you can see shoulder blade, backbone, shoulder blade. It's just what you want to see in them. You don't want to see teats on the neck of the scrotum. Herd Bull Fertility by James Drayson. I want to see the teats, but I want them all up here on the belly. What I don't want is to know that the teats of the daughters are going to be funnel shaped. I want teats that would be more like this one, but placed up here. The location tilted udder, if they're down on the neck, but the shape of the teat corresponds to the shape that the bull has. So a bald udder, that's what we're looking for. If you've got this, you're not going to get a level, and the teats won't be nice like that. This again is out of Drayson, but the big deal here is the shape of the scrotum. It's a thermoregulatory system. If you're feeding grain, you're putting fat cells in the testicles, but you're putting fat all around more abnorms because it's too hot and less total semen. You want a small neck. We don't want a lot of heat transfer from the belly of the bull down into the scrotum, and then the epididymis both right on the bottom. I don't know if you want to take a picture of the screen. Again, Jared, you're welcome to share all my slides, or if people just would like that slide. I guess if we were doing something on human health, I would have a different list, but that's a pretty good list. It's really hard to find Man Must Measure now. If you've got $750 or more, you could probably find it. This is a really good book, but you won't find it in the US. Abe Books or Alibris, it'll probably have to come over from England or the European continent. The freight will cost you more than the book. Anyway, everybody has their favorites. I was reading a book on epigenetics, and I came across this Waddington's Epigenetic Landscape. The earlier in life we do the right or the wrong thing, the more we affect either poorly or to the good side. So at the point of conception, I was at a fellow's place about 15, 20 miles off the east end of Lake Erie. It's about a month before calving, and he had 45 purebred cows. So he's got 20 to 25 heifers each year. And in his yearling heifers, or I guess 11-month-old heifers, he had one or two I thought would make a replacement. In his 23-month-old heifers, he had 3 or 4, but in his 35-month-olds, 1 month away from getting ready to calve, he had 13 or 14. I'm like, whoa, something changed. Did you, different bull, different mineral program? No. Finally, I said, well, did you either have a really dry or a really cold winter? Because where he lives, a lake effect snow, it rains in the fall, they're in mud, then it snows and melts and they're in mud, and then they're in mud, and they're in mud, and they're in mud. Well, he said, yeah, we had a bad winter. His term was a bad winter. We had a bad winter here a few years ago. I go, when was it? He got his phone out. The winter that those 35-month-old heifers getting ready to have their first calf, he couldn't do it at 2. He just, no way he could develop them. He had to wait to 3 to calve. The winter they were in utero, it got 12 or 15 degrees colder in the fall. The ground froze. So they're either on frozen ground or snow all winter. Took away the stress of mud all winter. And I said, you've either got to move, wasn't going to happen, or you've got to recreate some situation where they're not in mud if you ever want to express the genetics you sell and then be able to sell them, because people don't want, well, they didn't want what he had. And then down here, there's a fellow on the Arizona Strip, takes 250 acres for 1 cow to make a living. He called me one August and said, normally I have to wean the calves off the first calf heifers at 3 months of age to get the heifers to breed back, excuse me. But they're not losing body condition this year like normal. And I said, well, a different bull? No. Did you get more than your normal 4 inches of rain? No. Mineral? No. Finally, I said, how long did you leave those heifers on their mother? And he thought for a little bit, and he said, that was the first time I tried that 10-month weaning. I said, that was kind of a leap of faith. And he said, yeah. We were talking off and on. And about 2.5 years later, he said, of all of the things I've tried out here on the Arizona Strip, this is the most profitable thing I've ever done. They just turn into cows right off the bat by developing the villi in the room and by leaving the calf on to wean in sync with nature. He said, you could not pay me $100 a replacement heifer to wean her before 10 months of age. So that's kind of end of the shape thing. Are there any questions that came up, Jared, before I get into the epigenetic side here?
Yeah, maybe we can take one quick question. It was the straight lines on the backbone down to the udder. What?
The vertical folds in the hide. If you're going to see them, they would normally be this being our cow, here's the head, you would see them in the shoulder area, and then if they were better, you'd see them over the ribs. But when you see them in the back, I could go back to the slide, but when you see them you see that rarely. That's a lot of butterfat. Butterfat, lower maintenance. It costs money to make milk. Butterfat is actually free. They're just really easy keepers. My favorite horse was a really easy keeper. I mean, as soon as the grass greened up, I had to kind of lock him down, or he would gain 100 pounds in a month. He was there are cows like that. The value of that big belly and leaving the calf on for 10 months to digest more, but just almost as important is the amount of butterfat that cow has, 3.5% versus 6%. And those ones with it's butterfat. Those are an indicator of butterfat. There. Did we get there?
Yeah, thank you. We got it. Thank you, Steve. About 20 minutes.
All right. So the two biggest problems that I see on the epigenetic side, the air, the water, the grass, the mineral, our handling, weather events, that sort of thing. And again, back to Alan, I imagine he'll talk about it, your area of concern, influence, and control. We can't control the weather. I was trying to get that guy there in New York to have something where they weren't in mud. I guess you're changing the weather a little bit there, but getting rid of the neighbor's toxins. And somebody says, well, I don't spray. And well, do you live where the wind doesn't blow? March 11th, 2011, there was a tsunami in Japan. Nuclear reactor at Fukushima failed. First lap across the U.S. is in a line from Boise to Philadelphia. Human miscarriages doubled in the next 12 months from cesium falling out of the sky from half a world away. How many people live upwind of you? How many people are not using chemicals? Okay, won't get political. Anyway, one of the detox clays, Redmond conditioner, a desert detox, sodium bentonite. I think there was one or two from Canada. I think there's a sodium bentonite mine in the southeast corner of Saskatchewan, Canadian product. They're very good at pulling toxins. I liken it to, it takes 500 straws to break the camel's back. The clay is going to get rid of the first 400, 450, so the immune system isn't spinning in the mud. And when something big comes along, the immune system can mount a response. Okay. So I'm going to talk about Ellen Bench. I'm going to have a slide where I took a screenshot of my website. You'd go to videos. You can find her video there where she talks about how to use it. One size doesn't fit all, basically, for anything. Mineral water. I'll talk about that on the other end, but improve your soil over time. I mean, look at Gabe Brown, dirt to soil. All of what I want to talk about here makes no difference to Gabe Brown. I asked Gabe one time, I said, well, how do you take care of the neighbor's toxins blowing in? He said, you get enough minerals, you get enough biology in the soil, it'll handle whatever's blowing in. Well, downstream of Chernobyl, can't think of the name of the farmer right now, but he had Gabe Brown type soil. Everything else was just obliterated. His farm got along just fine because he had enough biology in his soil. So those of you with Gabe Brown type soil, don't listen to this part. But there's a lot of different things you can talk about here. One thing to keep in mind is mammals, that would include us, that stay more alkaline or neutral, body pH, saliva, urine, tend to resist disease, internal, external parasites. For animals that get driven acid, too many of the neighbor's toxins, not enough minerals, weather stress, human stress. Every time after we get some calves with pneumonia. Well, you brought them in 4 times, dusty trail, pulled them off. They're bawling for 4 or 5. we create these issues. Sodium bicarbonate, number one, you're going to get there. The conditioner raises pH, binds the neighbor's toxins, has a bunch of minerals that aren't watered down by sodium chloride. Is very bitter. You will not, read my lips, you will not get enough in unless you entice. And then it promotes the growth of the biology in the gut. They digest a greater percent of what they ingest. So I have fine print here in which nobody can read. So let me blow it up for you. ADM, Cargill, Pfizer, or Monsanto did not approve what I say. And there are no double blind, double deaf, double dumb studies to prove any of this. I want you to start thinking for yourself. Most mixed minerals are dirty. The main problem, they might have a good formula, but the main problem is they get the individual ingredients out of China. Almost every individual ingredient out of China, copper sulfate, zinc sulfate, blah, 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 has cadmium in it. And the first thing that cadmium does in the cow's body is screws up her ability to regulate internal, external parasites. Erase. Her ability to regulate internal body temperature. I was thinking about what I was going to say next. They are too hot in the summer and don't breed. They're too cold in the winter and require more feed. The way you'd know you had a cadmium toxicity in your herd is if they have a hump in the back from the shoulders back to the hook bones, a classic cadmium toxicity. Either it was in a mineral you used, a fertilizer you used, or fertilizer someone else used on something you brought in to feed your cows. Okay, so I had a guy come to us school Gerald and I were teaching end of June 8 years ago. He was from Eastern Ohio. He had 250 cows. He already had 30 active cases of pink eye. 5 of them were blind. He went home and he made this mineral water. There's a YouTube mineral water, Steve Campbell. It's a 2-minute long video if you want to learn how to do it. Anyway, he went home and in a second stock tank, he made this mineral water the first 2 weeks of July when flies typically are getting worse and pink eye is getting worse. He emailed me back, said, other than one of the blind ones, the other 29 totally resolved, and he didn't get any more cases of pink eye for that 2-week period of time. There's in the book, We Eat Clay and Wear It Too by Neil Bossart. There's a 75-year-old lady who she took hot water, maybe that much volume wise of the, this much volume wise of the clay, and put her feet in there. Her intention was to pull toxins out of the bottom of her feet with this clay. Well, in the 15, 20 minutes it took to cool off, she must have forgotten what she was doing. Being frugal, she didn't want to throw it away, so she watered her house plants, killed every plant in her house. She'd pulled so many toxins out of her feet in 15 minutes time. The AI conception in Canada, there was a 3,000 head dairy hired Tom Swerzik, the fellow that did the autopsy on Secretariat. He went up, tested a bunch of stuff. Well, don't feed these 3 things. And you need to feed 10, 12 ounces of sea salt per dairy cow per day and 10, 12 ounces of conditioner per dairy cow per day. So they split the herd into 2, 1,500 the old way, 1,500 the new way. 60 days later, they went from 35% first service AI to 70% first service AI and 2 more liters of milk per dairy cow per day times 1,500 head. They quit the test. Now everybody's on the new deal. I had a guy 1st of August, a couple of years ago. The flies had hit really hard while he was away. He checked his cows in the morning. Everything was fine. I mean, he had 250 cows. I've never seen a herd of cattle in that much distress in my life. They were making more noise than if you had just weaned 500 calves. We went back out with in 4 different feeders. We put a 50-pound bag of the conditioner, a 50-pound bag of the bicarb, and he had some dry molasses. And over the next 2 days, the next 48 hours, those cows per pair consume 14 ounces of each, 7 ounces of bicarb a day, 7 ounces of conditioner per day times 2 days. But 36 hours after we put it out there, the cattle had gotten alkaline enough. They were no longer a good house for bugs. The flies left his cows, went to the neighbors' yearlings who were running with their hair, their tails in the air. And I thought he was going to have just a pink eye wreck. He didn't get one case B because we removed the stress fast enough. And I know a person, I'd called them before. I went to a conference one day, and their daughter had been up all night long, coming out both ends. She changed the bed sheets 3 times. And I said, well, give her a half a teaspoon of the conditioner. She didn't have the human grade clay. She just had the Redmond conditioner. Called back 12 hours later. And I said, well, how'd it go? And she said, she fell asleep in 10 minutes and slept for 11 straight hours. I like this photo because when you change the nutrition, look at how much more life there is. Same rock. Murray, he was seeing his elderly patients who'd predominantly been eating ocean-based protein, had fewer aches, pains, diseases than those who'd been eating land-based protein over the course of 20 years, bringing ocean water and sea salt back to the land. He was able to recreate the immunity to disease he'd found in the ocean. So acid versus alkaline, no minerals, too many of the neighbors' toxins. Improve the soil first and foremost. Baking soda, I like feeding that all by itself as a barometer. They're going along, eating about an ounce a day, and all of a sudden you turned left, and for whatever reason, now they're eating 5 ounces a day. There's something wrong with the feed in that pasture over there. So 4 ounces of sea salt, well, I should have had right here 4 ounces a day of the conditioner, plus 4 ounces of sea salt, plus 4 ounces of enticer. Sorry, should be the conditioner or the detox clay right here, 4 ounces a day of the conditioner. And apple cider vinegar, about 4 to 6 ounces. It's alkaline forming as well. The mineral water, again, YouTube mineral water, Steve Campbell. It's about 2 minutes long. I wish I had used the words out of balance instead of when I said imbalanced, which sounds too much like imbalance. The ocean floor is out of balance. Ellen Bench, she gave a podcast here 1st of June, I think it was. So you can find it up. I think it's my next slide under the videos. But she got so many calls in a week, she had to go back and do a second one about how to use it. But basically, for a week, you do this immune detox, immune boost, and then pro vitality for 10 weeks. Then you go back, immune detox, immune boost. She's got other things. But there's enough disease prevention for 200 cows for 1 year for a total cost of $400. That's $2 for a cow for a year for disease prevention. I highly recommend listening to that podcast. Okay, so right here, tailormadecattle.com, and then videos. You can find the video of Ellen there. You can also find a video where Will Winter did the A to Z of ACV on that. Anyway, tailormadecattle.com. There's a slide at the end that does that. If you have Gabe Brown type soil, none of what I'm talking about right now you need. It's all coming through the grass. Are you having problems? How close to toxins do you live? What kind of cows do you have? Native grasses have an advantage because the minerals haven't been mined out. The home field advantage, I talked about Fred Provenza earlier. Chemtrails, type of feed. So 12 ounces. I have a list of enticers right here. Ground wheat, ground barley, lentils, peas, sunflower meal. Those are all be less sprayed than corn or soybeans. If you're dried up winter or summer and you didn't have real high bricks summer grass or high bricks meaning mineral content, winter stored feed, probably vitamin A, D, and E. If you get the calves with the ring around their eye, it's that vitamin A and D deficiency. So Custom Feeds, Norfolk, Nebraska, they sell it, but you might be able to find it in other places. DDGs, okay. Takes 120 days to change out all the red blood cells on the way up and on the way down. Where are we at on time, Jared?
Yeah, we probably better start wrapping up. This is pretty.
Well, I want to
perfect.
show okay, so if you're putting the sea salt out in a salt box, it's 20% bioavailable. If you make that mineral water that's on that YouTube video, it's about 50 to 60. If you're foliar feeding your pastures 5 pounds of sea salt every 5 days during the growing season. Well, if you're 50 acres to the cow, you can't afford to do this. You can afford mineral water and the dry, but I don't like mixed minerals in general because of the cadmium coming from China. Let's see. Conditioner, you can put it in the ponds. How close do you live? Here's a cadmium hump in a cow. Everybody see the hump in her back here? She, for some reason, somewhere, she's picking up cadmium. First thing selenium does is detoxify lead, mercury, and cadmium, molybdenum. If the navel cords on the calves are shorter than 2 inches, you have a selenium deficiency. Well, you might have burned through all your selenium detoxifying cadmium that was in the mixed mineral that had the selenium in it. Yeah, let's just go for a question. I'm going to get down to, you're going to need more rim space doing this thing. There's, I got to do this one. This is right out of Factors Affecting Calf Crop. We're in a high energy, medium energy, or low energy, and we affect the amount of protein we feed. Okay, so we're in low protein, low, how much? 1/5. We still get as many animals pregnant. But now we're in a deal where there is no energy in the system. It's burnt up. We don't add any protein. It's the only place. We had a deal here, I think it was fall before last, in a strip kind of out through some of the western states where breed ups were 25% clear down to, I mean, from 25% open clear down to 60% open, and they just kept feeding more protein thinking they were going to fix the problem. So back to that. There you go. Questions if there's time.
Well, this is really good. We appreciate it, Steve. What do you guys think? If you guys like drinking from a fire hose here, learning from Steve, I'd love to get some shares in the chat, what your epiphanies are, what your takeaways are. The one question that I saw, and there's more, you could stick around for a bit and respond to those in the chat if you'd like, Steve. Difference between Redmond and the Kansas sea salt, Kansas gray.
So there's 3 main ones: the Redmond, the Kansas gray, Canopolis, independent salt company, but there's a couple of others there in Kansas, Central Salt and Hutchison, which are similar to the Kansas gray because they're all from Kansas and they're all great. The big deal on the Kansas gray is don't get the blue and white bag that has been treated with yellow prussiate of soda, an anti-caking agent that is cyanide. It's a form of cyanide. You want the green and white bag, C-Fine, that doesn't have the cyanide added, or you want the blue and white bag that doesn't have the cyanide added. Redmond and Kansas are both approximately 7% mineral. There is more iron in Redmond than there is in Kansas. But if you're saying the iron in Redmond is a problem, you better not be feeding any corn or any alfalfa, because there's way more iron in both of those. And if you have a iron problem, the vet's saying, well, you've got an iron problem. The Redmond salt was the last straw on the camel's back. The first 50 or 150 were the alfalfa or the corn. And then C90 is a modern day ocean where Kansas and Redmond, no Vikings or anybody since their pollution ever got into those two, unless you put the cyanide in there at Kansas. And there's a lot of them use that YPS because it was a way for somebody with cyanide to be able to get rid of it rather than have to take it to the EnviroSafe waste dump. But the C90 is a modern day ocean. So modern day, everybody since the Vikings. And Murray discovered that in the 50s. He said in the 70s it wasn't quite as good as when he started, but it has approximately 20% mineral per ounce instead of the 7-ish% for Redmond and Kansas. Long-winded answer, sorry.
Very good. Well, thank you, Steve. I know there's been some questions in the chat. Is this recorded? It is recorded. We'll get each individual's presentation edited and posted on our YouTube channel, which is the Profitable Ag Steward. We'll give you links to all these so that you can have that in your resource base. And also, people have asked for a slide, if they would share slides. And so, if you want to send those to me, I will email them to everybody in a format that works so that you can access that. And yeah, let's give Steve a big round of applause virtually here. Air clap. What a great job. What a great presentation. Way to kick off this summit, Steve. We sincerely appreciate you being part of this. And
I'm gonna
be sure and
here. So
very good. Well, thank you so much.